design to design this document here. Now this will happen a lot. You'll be given a document, maybe as a PDF or even as a printout, and you'll have to do your best to try and recreate it. Maybe the original files are gone, the original designer no longer works for that organization, or any combination of scenarios might create the reason to have to create a document from scratch with a visual example like we have here. Everything that you need to create this document, this image, and this logo are available on Blackboard. The Apex Final.png, that is the logo. 39 Montgomery.jpg, that is the picture of the building. And then here we have the document's content. All that text is in this Word document here. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go to InDesign and we're going to create a new document. So what we'll do first in our new document palette is change this to inches. Obviously, you can change it into millimeters, centimeters if you're into those, or points and picas if you have a base in traditional typesetting, which almost no one does anymore, or pixels if you're designing something that's meant to be based for the web or social media. So we'll stick with inches for now. 8.5 by 11, one page. We're not going to do facing pages because facing pages is what we'll do for multi-page documents like books and pamphlets, brochures, things like that that have pages that face each other. The columns, we'll just leave this go as its default. And for our margins, we're going to do a 1/2 inch because this document, as you'll notice, has no bleeds because it was designed to be printed on an office printer. And on office printers, the colors cannot go all the way to the edge, so we wouldn't design anything that would bleed off. So we'll leave those settings at 1/2 of an inch for the margins. We'll hit create. So what we'll do now, first thing I like to do is I want to get the copy in and set so that everything else will fit around that copy. Okay, so we'll go over here to the left-hand toolbar to the type tool and select that, and we will just draw out a text box. Now, some of the things that you're seeing here on the screen, these are the guides, and the guides are giving us that margin that we set, that 1/2 inch margin. And then the light blue line is the object's bounding box. In this particular case, the object is a text box. The object could be an image box as well. We can make these things visible and not visible through the view menu. We can do hide guides to hide the guides, and under the extras, hide frame edges would hide that blue frame edge around our text box. But we'll leave it there for now. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll go into that Word document and get that text that we need and import it in. Okay. So I'm just going to copy all of the text for now and paste it in to that text box. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to give me the default InDesign text font and size. This will differ depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC and the different fonts that you have installed on your computer. So it's given me Minion Pro 12 point with that automatic letting. Like I said, that auto is 120% of the point size, which is giving us that 14.4 letting. Okay. Now, if I look at the supplied document, this is a sans serif font. So I want to try and simulate that as close as we can. Now, you can try and match the font perfectly, depending on how important it is doing that, matched perfectly. Or you can just choose one that's close. I'm going to choose one called Roboto. It's a sans serif font. And just by comparing it to that document, it's roughly the same. Okay, close enough for our needs. Okay, now if you remember in class, we talked about the text never being wider than 2 times the length of the alphabet when it's set in that font, because it gets hard for a reader when they're reading this line of text to drop down to the next line. Sometimes they might skip a line or read the same line twice. Okay. In this case, I am going to leave it longer than 2 times the length of the alphabet. But in order to help that readability, I'm going to increase the leading or the line spacing between these lines to make it a bit easier. Okay. So I'm just going to select all of it. And then up here under our leading, we've got 12-point type. The leading set to auto would be 14.4. I'm going to set it maybe to 16. Let's see how that looks. Okay. So that looks a little better, a little bit easier to read. Okay. Now remember, as we've talked about in class many times, a lot of times you will get typos given to you by your client. Okay. It's going to be your responsibility to fix typos where they are obvious. Okay. In this case, the word constraints, the word design, the word utility, those are obvious typos. Okay. Ones that might not be obvious would be words like Conshohocken, Blackney, Ardmore. Okay. I would not change words like that without the input from the client. Okay. I might not know how to spell Conshohocken. I would definitely look that up, research it, make sure that I'm not sending any typos. Okay. You might get them from the client. The last thing you want to do is send those on to the printer and then have that very unpleasant conversation with your client later about where that typo originated. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is hyphenation. Okay. In a document such as this, where we have a lot of control over the text size, the font, the width of this document, the width of the text box, we can do our best to avoid hyphenation at all. Okay. There are 2 ways to get rid of hyphenation. In this particular case, I want this word regulations on one line. Okay. So one way I can do it is by pulling it up so that it all fits on one line. Okay. I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see better. And also one thing I've noticed here, this gap looks a little large. So does this one. Okay. Maybe there's 2 spaces here. Maybe there's a tab here. Okay. How we can see these things is if we go under Type menu, all the way at the bottom, Show Hidden Characters, and we'll see that there are in fact 2 spaces at the end of these lines, and that is a holdover from people who used to type in monospaced fonts on typewriters, where you would add a second space after a sentence. That is no longer necessary with computer-generated fonts such as these. So whenever you see those 2 spaces, delete them so that you have 1. Okay. So let's go back and figure out how to get this word regulations up onto one line. Okay. One way we can do that is with the tracking. So I'm going to highlight the entire line prior to the word regulations and the word regulations. Okay. Now there are 2 places that you can change the kerning or the tracking between characters, and that's the space between the individual letters. Okay. Either one works. They're based on different algorithms. I can use this one at the bottom here, and all I will do is type in, let's say, -10, which should squish the letters together a little bit. Squish them together a little bit, but not quite enough. So let's go to 20. And that brings my word regulations back onto one line, but not so much that you can visually tell that the letters have been squished together. They've been tracked or kerned closer together. Okay. The other way, I'm going to undo what I just did, would be to bump words down. If I bump this word "the" to this line, maybe it will push regulations down onto this line so the whole word stays unhyphenated, okay? And I will do that with a soft return, or in this case, the keystrokes will be shift return. Didn't quite work, but let's try that. We'll bump regulation down, okay? And that works as well, okay? Either technique works, whichever one you think is best, so that you can get a block of text with no hyphenation. Okay. Now, I would not do this in a very long document. There are ways to set this automatically within InDesign using style sheets, which we'll talk about later in the course, where we can automate this process. But for a single paragraph or two or three, we can do this manually without having to set rules for for paragraph style sheets. Okay. So that gets us our first paragraph. And then you'll notice what I like to do sometimes is that first line is bolded. Okay? Kind of a visual lead-in. Okay, you don't have to do this. It's a design feature. But I can take those first couple of words and then select a bold face of the Srabato font. Okay. I didn't bump Montgomery down at all. And now I've got that nice bold lead in. So just a visual cue for the reader. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about are these double returns to give us spaces between paragraphs. Okay. Again, something that is not necessary anymore to hit return twice to start the next paragraph, because we can set a spacing. We can set a space after this paragraph. We can set a space before on this paragraph. We could select both if we'd like. In this particular case, I'm going to delete that hard return, or paragraph return it's called, and set a space before on this paragraph. Okay. So up in this text menu up here, when the A is selected, that's for characters. 12 point, 16 point, all my different, all caps and superscripts and subscripts and strike throughs, things like that. Okay. But if I select the paragraph icon, now I can format entire paragraphs. Okay. So in this particular case, while I'm still highlighted in this paragraph, I'm going to set the space before to, let's go a quarter of an inch, okay, 0.25 inches. Okay. That gives me my space before. Now it might look like, sort of a hassle compared to the hit and return twice, but if you can imagine doing this over a multi-page document, dozens of paragraphs, maybe even hundreds of paragraphs, and I have a little too much copy. Let's say I have a 60-page document and my copy is bumping it out to 61 pages. I have a little bit too much copy. I can select all of the paragraphs in those 60 pages and tweak this space before just a little bit, almost to the point where you can't visually tell, by a hundredth of an inch sometimes. And over the course of those 60 pages, it might reduce that space enough where my text will only be 60 pages long instead of 61. You can't do that if you've got hard returns built into there. Okay, so that's why we're going to use space before. Okay. Now to match this bold that we used here, I want to match that here. So I will go back to the individual characters and select bold. Okay. So now we'll notice here on our supplied document, this looks like it's a 2-column text box. Okay, but you'll notice this column is narrower than this column. Okay, if we were to select a 2-column text box, those columns will automatically be the same size all the time. Nothing we can do about it. Okay, but what we can do is we can set up tabs so that we can determine the width of these paragraphs. I'm sorry, the width of these columns, which will come in handy in future projects in the course, being able to determine the width of our columns. Okay. So we jump back to InDesign. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this. We're going to take each bulleted line and combine it with the one below it, so that each line will contain 2 of our bulleted points. Okay. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to set tabs up. Okay. This is going to be a bit of a 2-part process. Okay. First thing we're going to do is select all of the lines that these tabs that we are going to create will affect. Okay. If we just do the first line, it will only affect the first line and it will ignore these. So we want to select all of the lines. Okay. And if we go under type, you will see tabs selection, and it will give us this paragraph, I'm sorry, this dialog box. And I'm going to move it so that it lines up with our text box here. Okay. Here are our tab options: left, centered, right, and then align it on a decimal or any specific character that we choose. Okay. This will show us the mathematical area of the text, I'm sorry, the tab, and in the gray bar is where we'll place the tabs. Okay. So we'll go with our left, and we're going to do our first one, which we're going to give this a bit of an indent. Okay. So we'll click right there in that gray bar and move it around until it's at 1/4 inch, 0.25. Okay. And then we're going to look and see where is our longest bullet. So it's this guy here, just driveway alignment and parking layout. Here's the bullet layout here. So our next one, let's align it, say, at 3.5 for our second tab. Okay. Okay. Now we will put a tab in front of each bullet. And that gives us our visually our 2 columns, with this column being wider than this column. When we're done, we can close the tabs, zoom out a little bit. So next thing we're going to do, if we look at our supplied document, across the bottom, sort of set up like a letterhead, we've got the name of the company, its address, and its website. That's supplied to us right here. We can get rid of this line. Please include contact information. It's not needed. Delete that. And I'm going to take that information, the company's name and address and website, and cut it, not delete it, but cut it to the pasteboard. And then I'm going to create a second text box across the bottom. Click on the type tool and just drag it out. Paste my information in there. Okay. Now it was all on one line, so let's make this all on one line. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do 2 spaces, type a bullet, which is option 8. 2 more spaces. Okay. Now you'll notice it's a little big, breaks the 2 lines, and I don't want that. I can select all of that text and drop its point size down until it will fit. And then I'm going to want to center this as well. And I can click the box, get my drag handle here, and drag it so that it aligns towards the bottom. And then the last thing I have is the address of the building, and you'll see that it is supplied here as a caption in the bottom of the image. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that aside and save it for later. So I'm going to draw another text box out here in the pasteboard. Select that, cut it, and paste it over here for now. Get rid of this unnecessary line. Get rid of all my errant hard returns. And that's where I am so far. Okay. Drag this up, keep everything clean. Okay. Now let's bring that image in. Okay. So the way I like to do that, under File, Place. I'll be able to grab that 39 Montgomery.jpg image. It comes in as a loaded cursor. I'm going to try and get as close to that top corner as possible and paste it in. Okay. So now you'll see it's come in at its actual size, but it's not quite wide enough. Okay. So what I'm going to do, drag the text box so that it is as wide as it needs to be. So now it is as wide as my margins, my half-inch margins that I selected when I created the document. Okay. But what I did is I drug the box that contains the image, not the image itself. So how I do that, instead of the item tool here, the selection tool, I'm going to do the direct selection tool. And this blue bounding box is the bounding box for the image, but if I click on the image with the direct tool, I get this brown bounding box, and that is the image itself that I'm now moving independently of the box that contains it. So I can move that image. It's not quite big enough. I can go up here and just bump it up a little bit. And drag it around so that it fits within the bounding box that it contains, and it fills it all the way up 100% all the way across. Okay. What this does is this allows us to change the size of the image within the box. So as I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, I got a lot of empty space over here, a lot of empty space over here. I want this image to be a little bit bigger. I want this building to fill this box a little more. So I can click on it, bump it up a little bit more. Let me go to 112%, drag it. See, now I feel that the image fills that box a little better, a little bit less wasted space around the sides there. Okay. So learning how to move an image within its box, move the box around with the image in it. Basically, the best way to learn that is just to mess with it a little bit. You'll learn to figure out how that works between the direct tool, the selection tool and the direct selection tool. And then one way to cheat is under the object menu and then fitting. You can fill the frame proportionally with the image, which means the image will fill the frame and not get scaled. You can fit the content within the frame. You can fit the frame to the content. You can fit the content to the frame. Some of these will help you out if you're in a pinch and you need to just get that picture in that frame as quickly as possible. Use these as kind of like a cheat. Okay? But the best way is just to move things around until you visually like where they are. Okay? So next thing we're going to do is we're going to create this blue box that goes across the bottom. Go over here to the rectangle tool. Just click and drag out a rectangle. Okay. Now you see there's really nothing there except the bounding box, because if you look up here and over here, I've got a fill and a stroke, and right now both of them with that little line through it means it does not have a fill or a stroke. It's an invisible box. I can give the box a fill. And what InDesign has given us is the basic CMYK. You're just cyan, magenta, yellow, black. It's best approximation of RGB, and that's your defaults. Okay. But we have other colors here that we want to bring in that match that logo, that Apex logo. But we haven't brought the Apex logo in yet. So for now, we're just going to give it this temporary blue fill. Move that a little bit. And that gives us our blue bar here. So next thing we'll do is we'll bring in the logo. Now here, if I just place that logo, File menu, place, choose the logo, gives me this loaded cursor, and when I paste it, the logo has come in at a gigantic size. Okay. Now I can mess with scaling this, it takes a while, or I can draw the box first where I want that logo to appear. And with that box active, if I choose place, it will place the logo within the box. Again, it is still very giant, but remember, we can cheat fitting. We can fill the frame proportionally with the logo. Brings it in quickly without having to mess with it too much. Is we want to basically sample the colors out of this logo to be able to use them in the rest of the document. Okay, two ways to do that. One, open the logo in something like Photoshop and sample all the colors, or two, maybe the colors have been supplied to you by the organization that you're working for. Okay, so we'll say in this case that I already know the color values for these colors. So we'll start off, we'll select the box that we want. We want to make it this dark blue out of the logo. Okay, I can double click here and type in those values. In this case, I happen to know the values: 94 cyan, 85 magenta, 43 yellow, and 43 black. That gives me the box the same color as the blue, the dark blue in the logo. Okay, and then I can also do the same thing for this text. I make it that green. Okay, same idea. Double click here and type in the values. Okay, so 67 magenta, 67 cyan, 23 magenta, 64 yellow, and 4 for the black. Now that will give me that green color out of the logo for this text down here. And the last thing we have to do is this text here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make it bold. I'm going to right justify it. I'm going to drag it into the blue box. Now you see that it has disappeared because it is now behind this box. Okay. So if I do arrange, okay, under the object menu, I can choose these options. I'm going to send that blue bar to the back. So now the text is here, but then the picture's in front of it too. So I can also send the picture to the back. Now I've got them in the right order. Okay. I can highlight this text. I'm going to make it white to start so I can see it. Okay. Now we'll look in our sample document and realize that the Ardmore PA is that dark green. I'm sorry, that light green. And then 39 Montgomery is a slightly larger font. So we can go ahead and do that. We'll go ahead and make 39 Montgomery a little bigger. And this for this Ardmore font color, we'll again type in that value for the light green, 67 for the cyan, 23 for the magenta, 64 for the yellow, and 4 for the black. Okay, that'll give us that green color. Okay, that's basically it. So what we can do now to get a visual is we're going to hide these hidden characters. So type hide hidden characters. We're going to hide these frame edges. So under the view menu, extras, hide frame edges. And under the view menu for the guides, hide guides. And that gives us the more of a visual, uncluttered version of our document. That's basically all we would need. Now, obviously, it's not perfect. We can tweak things, but that gets us pretty close for week 2 of this course. So give that a shot and turn it in as your class participation, and we'll see you next week.